is Joe Betar.
This is Ramon Robles.
And we talk to fascinating people about their love of hunting, shooting sports, and the outdoors. This is Hunting Matters. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us today for this week's episode of Hunting Matters. Our guest this week is Chris Dorsey. Chris, it would take us an hour just to read your bio, but I'm going to give them a kind of a quick rundown of who you are for those who don't know. Chris is a publishing and television pioneer and strategist. He's a biologist, too. Philanthropist, author, entrepreneur, and host of Sporting Classics with Chris Dorsey, where I think, Chris, a lot of people probably know you best from over the years. And you've been involved in a lot of non-hunting projects as well. So thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here as always. Always fun to join you guys.
And I think this is your second or third trip with us here. We appreciate it. And first on video. So you get to see how ugly Ramon and I really are.
It's a little scary, but I'll get over it.
It's the headphones,
It is the headphones.
Yeah.
It is the headphones. So, Chris, where are you today? Where in the world are you located?
I am in western Colorado, just outside of Meeker. Yeah, we've got a property out here, and the weather's beautiful. It's about 70 degrees and sunny. The trout are fat, the elk are bugling, so it's a good time to be here.
Yeah. Are you guys elk hunting?
We're going to be elk hunting in about a week, yeah.
Is that when the season opens?
Well, we've had bow season up until a couple of days ago, and now rifle season's going to kick off here at the ranch in a couple of days, yeah.
So did you bow hunt this year?
I did not. I did not. Just going to rifle hunt. I've got some guests out. Walt Boomer, General Boomer's coming out, and some friends from Brays Island. So it'll be a good time. Yeah.
Awesome. There's nothing like Colorado elk or elk in general bugling in the fall. It's just, I get chills just thinking about it.
Well, we had such a severe winter just a couple of winters ago, but they've really bounced back. So we've got good numbers again, and it's encouraging. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was a huge concern for I know fishing game agencies as well as people who love to hunt and fish and love the outdoors. That really took a toll in the western states, and Wyoming, Idaho, you guys in Colorado, and so you're seeing population starting to bounce back.
One of the best Septembers ever. I was just talking to one of our guides who said we've got elk everywhere. So yeah, it's encouraging. I don't know if they're just moving into our zone or if they just have just kind of repopulated over the last couple of years or what, but. Good news is they're here. So
that's good. That's good, man. I'm excited for you guys.
Thanks.
We've talked, Chris, a couple of times before about your background and how you got in this area. So we won't rehash a lot of that, but I'm just curious, just as a broad scope question, what I know you won't say these things about yourself, so we get to say them for you. But you basically have created a multimedia empire over the years. And I know it's taken a lot of hard work and a lot of ups and downs, that sort of thing. What inspired you to take that path in life?
Just trying to avoid honest work. It's been my mission for a long time. And it's good work when you can find it, when you can go out and hunt and write about it in the early days and produce television shows about it. And it's always come with a bit of a mission, a little bit of responsibility, I think, when you've got a platform to make sure you do justice to the content itself, and you blend in a little bit of conservation, the role of hunters in conservation. And as you know, I spent a lot of time in the mainstream, doing mainstream cable television. We're doing IMAX films. So a lot of what we do is a great way for us to spoon feed some conservation, create some earned media around some of these properties where we can celebrate the role of hunting and conservation. That's, if I have a life's work and passion, it really is just that. It's celebrating hunting and the role of hunters in conservation, and any chance I have to do that, whether it's in Forbes or it's in other magazines, I do it.
Ramon, you're muted, bud.
Oh, it's a Teams call. How did and it was such a good question. I guess I'll ask another question. How did your relationship with Forbes begin?
It was through a third-party friend. I used to do some stuff with the Wall Street Journal years ago, and I shifted so heavily into television and had gotten kind of out of print all the way around, really, just a little bit of writing for print just because I was so focused on TV. And he said, I need to develop some other platform. Started talking to some friends that knew some folks over there. And they said, actually, we're looking for somebody kind of in that lane, somebody who can do outdoors conservation. We know it's a big business. Forbes obviously is business forward. but it's also lifestyle. And it's interesting how many people that are very successful in business happen to have a passion for the outdoors. And so it's been fun to, and they give me a lot of latitude. I mean, I can write about a lot of different things, whether it's, the Second Amendment, or it's real estate, or it's adventure in Africa, or it's something in Iceland, or it's politics to some degree as well. So, just being able to write about things like the Mountain Lion Initiative and Prop 123 or whatever it is out here now, 127 actually. That's a big deal, being able to have a mainstream platform and talk about these issues and not just talk to the choir all the time is fun for me.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, because the first thing I think about was, okay, Chris Forbes is writing for the people in the outdoor world know who you are and what you're about. People that are non-outdoor, that are reading Forbes, reading online, that sort of thing, see your content, see your information. Do you ever find yourself in the Joe Rogan position where he comes out on certain issues where, people are like, cancel Joe Rogan, which is ridiculous. Everybody's got entitled their own opinion in the First Amendment rights, which obviously is a big topic this year in the election year. But do you catch a lot of heat from either your readers or Forbes, or how do they react to that? Was it a little bit of a shock to them at first, or to tell us a little bit about that overall experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a dance, I would say, with the editorial team over there, but I think they've been really great to work with, and I think they get this landscape, and again, it's not a political platform. It's not it's not sort of a right-wing Fox News. It's not a left-wing MSNBC. It's really a business-centric lifestyle. Okay, people like to go hunting. That's great. Tell us about it. Tell us about the economics of it. Tell us about the driver of that category, that industry, if you will. And so that's been kind of the focus. But occasionally you'll get a letter back saying, particularly I did a piece on elephant hunting and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service kind of looking at that as something relative to imports you guys know very well about. And I was surprised I didn't get more negative response, actually. But I laid out the narrative, right, and talked to the right people. And it's like, look, if you care about elephants, you need to understand something about hunting relative to elephants, right? And hunting is not the same as poaching, no differently than a pharmacist is not a drug dealer. So let's be smart about how we tell the story. And I think with that kind of latitude, and I think I'm reasonably good at kind of talking through that to a mainstream audience, understanding I've got a grounding in the outdoors, but I also have a bit of a grounding in the mainstream and understand those sensibilities, really just because I've dealt with network executives and editors and folks over the years for a long period of time. So after you get a lot of hate mail for a long period of time, you fine tune your message a little bit better and understand and anticipate what might come depending on what you say and write. So you write around that, you produce around that, et cetera.
You mentioned earlier Proposition 127. Do you know? Can you tell us what that is and why should we care about that?
Yeah, it's the ballot initiative in Colorado to ban mountain lion hunting and bobcat hunting and lynx. Of course, the joke is there barely are any lynx. They're not hunted and they're not trapped, but they wanted to lump that in there to just get the emotion going. And it's not driven by science. It's not driven by anything other than anti-hunting groups, mostly outside of Colorado. In Washington, D.C., Wayne Pacelli, the former head of HSUS, Humane Society of the United States, who was ousted from sexual harassment charges from HSUS, has formed new organizations in Washington. They funded the ballot initiative to get the vote on the ballot and or get the measure on the ballot. And so this notion that somehow there's a groundswell in Colorado to want to stop mountain lion hunting, it just isn't the case. These are groups that are using this to raise money. That's what they do. And they're not going to do anything for mountain lions. And the reality is, just like California, when they ban mountain lion hunting, the state's going to do the killing of mountain lions instead of hunters. The mountain lions will be killed one way or another. So this notion that somehow you're going to protect mountain lions if you ban the hunt of mountain lions is idiotic. And we're at all-time highs with mountain lions. The state has done a terrific job managing mountain lions in every species in Colorado. We have a great state agency. So the notion that you're going to somehow take wildlife management out of the hands of the professionals, the people that are mandated, chartered to manage wildlife in the state of Colorado, and suddenly turn that over to the popular vote. And the only reason this is happening is because they've tried, legislative runs, they've tried through the commission, and they've been categorically rejected because they're bad ideas. They're bad ideas for wildlife, they're bad ideas for people. And so their last recourse basically is to go to the people directly through the referendum process. And there's 26 states that have the referendum process. So that the key thing for the industry, I've been giving a lot of talks and doing interviews and writing about this, but the key thing for the industry to understand is what's happening here is the model is being perfected. The animal rights model is being perfected in the referendum states here in Colorado. It's going to be transported to New Mexico, to Washington, to Oregon, probably to Arizona, to other states across the West, especially across the West. And so if you think this is just some one-off, I don't really care about mountain lions in Colorado anyway, it's really not about mountain lions. This is about a model that's going to be transported. And if they win this one, we're going to see really hard, expensive fights in the future. So I'm just trying to get the industry, myself and many others are trying to get the industry to embrace the notion that better to spend and fight now and stand our ground in Colorado than to let this thing pass and have to fight a massive fight across the country, because they'll then understand 95% of the people don't hunt. They don't have a vested interest in hunting. So it's much easier to use emotion to sway the general public against hunting than it is to throw science at the general public and hope they swallow the Kool-Aid, because it's what we're seeing now is the campaign that they're running isn't based in anything factual. It's all emotion, and they're really good at it. I mean, the reality is they've been perfecting this for a long time. And, we've been focused as a category on, let's make sure we got habitat. Let's go save the wetlands. Let's go save the prairies. Let's go save, the turkeys, the ducks, the pheasants, et cetera, which is noble. It's a wonderful thing to have done. It's a great story to tell. The problem is, and I wrote about this in the industry trades, the tragic flaw of the North American model is we did all this wonderful work and we never told the general public what we were doing and why it was important to them. And so we've lost this narrative. In the meantime, our opponents have gone after us and made our lifestyle toxic to the mainstream. And so now we're in a situation where in some cases we don't even have the ability to get onto the platforms to tell our story, because we've already been so marginalized that we aren't even allowed to tell our story. So this has been a massive mistake by the category. Frankly, it's almost unbelievable that we're here, but we are. And so now you're seeing this frenzy from the animal rights groups going, we have figured this out. We have cracked the code on how to end this thing once and for all. And that is the referendum process.
Wow.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was it played?
Right.
So it's just animal rights. It's just, dog lovers or whatever not wanting you to hunt. There's no other reason behind it. I mean, these animals aren't eating babies or anything. I mean, sometimes there's valid reasons on both sides, but in this case, it just sounds like they want to save cute animals.
Well, they want to raise money. They really don't care about the animals. I mean, I find it very difficult to believe that they really give a damn about the animals. When you look at the track record of where they spent their money, what exactly have they done for animals? What exactly has the Humane Society of the United States done for pets and pet shelters? Oh, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
They've traded off that name for a long, long time. And these are just fundraising organizations. They line their pockets. They pay their top executives exorbitant salaries, and we've got some information that just came out on some of these salaries coming out of some of these organizations, and it's appalling. But what they do for wildlife is zilch. But who knows that, right? Who's told that story?
Right.
They've defined us in the mainstream, and we've never really gone after them to define them in the mainstream, and that's got to change.
Yeah, I think there's like one or two organizations out there that's their kind of their life dream is just they bring. They're not attacking HSUS or PETA or Center for Biological Diversity. What they're doing is they're bringing the truth to the forefront and saying, guys, are you really aware of this, of how this money's being spent?
Yeah, there's a group called humanewatch.org.
Right.
And it's the Berman group out of D.C., which is, has been hired by the ag community, the pet community, et cetera. And they've really done a deep dive in, the forensic accounting, if you will, of the entire animal rights movement. And it's a shady, nefarious world. And there's a book coming out. They're going to be releasing a book that their comment to me was, you're not going to believe this stuff in this book in terms of behavior of the people within the organization, where the money is gone. Of course, HSUS has been convicted of federal racketeering charges, bribery charges. These are not good groups. These are not well-intentioned people. These are people looking to scam and make a bunch of money, and they're good at it.
Yeah, they're very good at it, and they're organized, and they're wealthy, and it's that age-old question that we continue to ask ourselves in the outdoor world, whether you're a hunter, fisher, just somebody love the outdoor, whatever. Number one, you need to be aware of these groups and what they're really all about. Number two is, how do we get organized to fight them? Because we've done let's just be honest, you've been around long enough to know this as well. I'm not preaching to the choir here, but we've done a poor job as hunter conservationists and as people who love the outdoors to organize and pool our resources, our money, our thought processes to really stand up. And I, quite frankly, I know you probably feel the same way. I, quite frankly, as a hunter conservationist, I'm sick and tired of being in the defensive position. I want to play a little offense and cross the goal line every once in a while.
Amen. Yeah. I mean, look, it's how do we create a funding mechanism where we can create a sustained campaign to the mainstream that treats hunting as a brand, right? Let's take hunting and imagine it as a brand. What are the features and benefits and attributes of that brand, and celebrate that through conservation, the conservation story that surrounds that brand, and do it in the mainstream, whether it's, mainstream newspapers, television, radio, but sustain it, get into the school systems, really be much more aggressive about it, but also go after our opponents. Let's expose the soft underbelly of these animal rights organizations, which humanewatch.org is doing a very good job of, and make sure that's understood in the mainstream. So before somebody writes a check to HSUS or one of these other animal welfare organizations, they understand this is where that money is going. And we just haven't done a very good job of that. But as we look at it, I was just in the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation board meeting in DC, and I said, when is the Pittman-Robertson Modernization Act coming? When do we look at that funding mechanism and say, we've got to take a portion of that to save hunting, not conservation, but to save hunting? Because at the end of the day, if we don't have hunting, nobody's going to give a damn about the habitat anyway. So, the reality is, you better protect those rights if you think there's anybody who's going to give a damn about raising money for habitat down the road. So I think we've just been a little flat-footed, and I think we've been siloed in the category, in the industry, to say, well, we focus on that bird or that fish, and we do gun rights and we do whatever, but nobody's taken the 50,000 foot view of the entire category and said, where are the global threats to us? Yeah. And what does that look like? And what do we do about it? Right? That's, at the end of the day, we're on the clock now. I mean, we're seeing it in Colorado. If you live in Colorado, you know exactly what's going on. You know exactly what's coming. If they pass this, we're going to have mountain lions, we're going to have wolves because of the ballot box biology process, and essentially black bears, which aren't really hunted in Colorado. There's no baiting, there's no hound hunting, so it's only the luck of spot and stalk. So we're going to have three apex predators on the landscape, and the narrative from the anti-hunters at that point is simply going to be, why do we need hunters to hunt deer and elk? We have all these apex predators to do that. We know that's coming. Yeah. This is not a mystery. There's no surprise about what the next ballot measure is going to be. So, again, I just want to echo, if we don't figure this out now, we've got a hell of a price to pay down the road.
Well, I'm still green to all of this, all these issues, but it sounds like, legislative processes, organizing. I think we go back to the days where they pull their best guy and we pull our best guy and we fight to the death.
I'll take the bet too.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I know a couple of UFC fighters we could call on that'll be on our side real quick.
There you go.
And the thing is look, Rocky Mountain Elk, hunting is conservation. That's their tagline, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. And I think a lot of organizations and individuals and writers and media people such as yourself have done a good job of saying hunting is conservation, but it truly is. Those two terms are, like you said, without hunting, these animals become commodities. There's no funding for them. There's no specialty. There's no specialness around them. And so, it sounds kind of cliche, but hunting is conservation from that standpoint. Those two terms are interchangeable. And I've been in this industry long enough. You have too. I just don't know. Like you said, is it the Pittman-Robertson Modernization Act, where you've got dedicated funding to save hunting and promote the future of it? I don't know what it is. It's just frustrating sometimes. We all continue to fight the good fight. We're not going to give up. But I really wish we'd have just something stronger.
And there's got to be a funding mechanism, and whether it's Pittman-Robertson or something else, an expansion of Pittman-Robertson into other hunting products beyond guns and ammo. And look, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation does a terrific job. They're very active here in Colorado right now. I mean, they've spent a lot of money right now in Colorado on this ballot initiative. I just met with Kyle and a couple of the board members here in Denver. They flew in for a meeting relative to funding a campaign against this measure. And so I really applaud what they've done. They've been really terrific at it, and other groups have as well. The problem we face with these kinds of organizations is that they're really built to talk to themselves and to potential new members that are already in the category. So the idea of how do we get to the mainstream still sits on the table. That hasn't been answered, hasn't been addressed. And that's, if we don't figure out how to get a majority out of the 95% of the country that doesn't hunt, I don't know what we do. I mean, at the end of the day, it's we've got to have that, because that is the new enemy. That is the new model. And of course, we see these polls, and I see them all the time, that the majority of Americans support hunting. Well, that's great until they're faced with a campaign against hunting, and then that doesn't hold up. And that's exactly what we're seeing in Colorado. So I think you could take a lot of those polls and throw them in the trash. I don't think they mean much up in the face of a referendum, and in the face of emotional campaigns. And I think part of it too is how do we fight these measures? I mean, what sort of messaging are we taking out? And if we think, science-based wildlife management is the only way forward, is going to win the day against an emotional argument, I think we're going to have a real problem with that, because throwing facts at an emotional argument is like taking a slingshot to a gunfight. It's just, we're emotional creatures, man. If we don't recognize that we better communicate through emotion first, emotion plus information equals communication. It's the oldest axiom in the communication business. If we don't figure that out, we're going to just keep losing. That's the reality of it. And it's great to say we are conservationists, and that's a long-term story. That is a good story, but it's a long-term story. If you're trying to win in 45 days on a ballot measure, you better be a little bit more aggressive, in my opinion. You better be strongly emotional in your response to emotional arguments. And that's new for this category. It's just a very new approach.
Well, I don't want to give them any credit, but look, HSUS and those types of animal welfare organizations, as they choose to call themselves in that category, they've done a good job. And I don't see why we can't recreate that model in the hunting world. It's number one, like you said, it's money. You got to have the money, because from there you can do white papers and research and science and media campaigns, et cetera, and fund those things and bring that to the forefront of the public thought. So they've done a good job. I mean, you can't deny that.
They have, and they've largely been unopposed. I mean, the reality is again, we have been so focused on doing the good work of habitat and just ignoring these people that have been destroying us in the mainstream and marginalizing, us in the mainstream, that we've just now lost the ability to even engage in the mainstream in some cases. So yeah, I mean, it's strange to me as a category, with as many smart people as we have in it, that we haven't recognized this a long time ago. It's one thing to, do ads in your magazine to your members talking about conservation and hunting and the role. That's great. The North American model, that's great. But if the mainstream doesn't understand it, we're going to be facing more and more of these ballot measures, and we're not going to probably win.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you what does your gut tell you about Colorado and this proposition?
It's interesting. I've seen some of the early polling that RMEF actually financed, and it's closer than what the wolf issue was at the same time. And the wolf deal only passed by 1%. So it was, at the end of the day, it was a very close election here in Colorado on the wolves. This one, This one is a little bit different in that the female vote, is interesting. In Denver and Boulder, it's like 70% of women favor the ban. Not overly surprisingly, in two heavily Democratic counties of Colorado with women. So the idea is, how do you reach them? How do you break through? Not because you're going to get a majority of them, but you're going to peel off 10, 15, 20% perhaps with the right kind of campaign. So that's what we're working on right now, is just trying to get that messaging right, recognizing we're going to get Republican men. We already have a majority of them. We have the Western Slope. We have rural counties of Colorado. So we're working a lot of different angles right now, the earned media, the op-ed pieces, lots of television, radio interviews. But it's going to be a tough fight, just because the inherent emotion of seeing a cat shot out of a tree to somebody sitting in Denver and Boulder is a tough image to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, your team sent me some of the things you guys have been working on, the video shorts and things like that. And listen, I'm not a cat person. I love dogs. Cat's not my favorite, but that clip that you sent with the mountain lion with the freshly killed family cat outside the sliding glass door, and the family's child going, "What's going on, Mom?" And that, listen, if you're really an animal lover, you watch that and you go, "Wait a minute, I've got a decision to make here."
Well, and it's interesting when you look at that footage, because the cat is not looking up at the mother who's filming on her iPhone.
Right.
The cat is looking where? The cat is looking at the child.
Right.
I mean, intently looking at that child. Like, if that pane of glass weren't there, that would be my next meal. It's clear. Yeah. I mean, it's just as obvious as the day. So we went to Dan Prenslow, the former director of wildlife here in Colorado, and had him comment about that. And that's exactly what he said. He just said, look, you look at that cat, what it's doing, that cat's looking at its next meal, that child. So look, at the end of the day, are your chances of being eaten by a mountain lion really high in Colorado? No, but they're not zero. And just like somebody breaking into your home is low probability, but it's not zero. So what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So you're saying that the mountain lions are eating your pets?
Yeah, they're eating pets, they're eating livestock, they're attacking people. We had this horrific 911 call from two brothers in California. One was killed, one was severely mauled by a mountain lion. This just happened like a month or two ago. And it's blood curdling to hear the 911 call. And it's just, it's happening more and more because you've got more people moving into traditional cat range.
Yeah.
But once you stop hunting an apex predator, what happens? Like we see with grizzlies in Yellowstone and other parts of the West, they lose their fear of man. And so we've got all this footage of cats walking in the backyard, looking into windows, taking down pets. We're going to have more attacks. Everybody knows that if this proposition passes. And that's just the reality of it. So I think part of the messaging basically is to give pause to people in Denver and Boulder, families, women, moms, and say, just so you understand, there is a consequence if this thing passes, and part of that will be danger. You'll have more. I think our line is, a walk in the park is going to have a whole new meaning if this thing passes. So it's again using some of the emotion that's on our side. This is factually accurate. These people were attacked. These pets were killed. Here's video of that. You can't dispute it. And why don't we use that more often? Why aren't we using that in our campaigns? And that's why we are now. So
yeah, there's got to be a level of shock with some of these things and the way you address it and present it to the public, because listen, there's a reason why they run 90-second, 2-minute long commercials on whatever news channel at night at 10 o'clock of puppies and kittens in cages, and horrible conditions, because they pull at the heart.
Yeah. And
people react better to visual stimuli. So, we could do the same.
Well, and our opponents have used emotion forever. Yeah. And we, it's interesting to look, and I say this as a biologist, it's interesting when you talk to other biologists and people in the science community, it's almost like they get twitchy about using any kind of emotion. And I said, well, look, we're 45 days away from an election here. And if you want to win, this is not factually inaccurate. We are not telling a lie here. We're simply showing the reality of what happens when one of these cats attacks. And I don't feel bad about that at all. I mean, I think that's a reality that people need to understand will be part of the outcome of this election.
maybe I don't understand the makeup of Colorado, but from 1,000 miles away, I see Colorado as a hunting state where everybody hunts. And I guess any hunter knows what you're saying is the truth, and they would go along with what you're saying. So where is this? Who are these people whose strings are getting tugged? Are they people who've come in to Colorado from other states? I mean, who are these people?
Well, there's a lot of residents of Colorado that are very urban, right? Again, less than 5% of the population hunts, so they don't get out of Denver much.
Yeah.
They don't, they don't go into the wild. They don't hunt at all, and so they're susceptible to messaging that's emotional, and they react to it, and we don't counter that very often. So we have to counter that. The reality is we can't just keep talking about, lion populations are at an all-time high because the state of Colorado has done a great job managing them, which is absolutely true. But in the face of an emotional argument, that isn't going to win the day. And we're seeing that in the polling data already. So we have to figure out better methods of communication. And really, it's all about emotion. If we can't harness emotion in our pitch here, we're not going to win.
That's the truth.
In my opinion.
That's the truth with most elections. I mean, even the presidential election, not to
Absolutely
dig too far down in that, but it's always emotion.
Yeah. It's not a new concept at all.
No.
It's just new to our category is all. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two things that sell and make an impact: sex and emotions. I mean, they both. That's what the whole advertising world is driven upon, and impulse. And so, Chris, I'm going to give out your websites, your television show website, Sporting Classic TV, classicstv.com. But I'm guessing these videos that you guys created are on your social media as well.
Yeah, there's some on our Instagram, which is the Sporting Classics TV. Yeah, and obviously it'll be on social media and lots of different locations.
People need to see it, because when I popped it open, I popped open the link on, and I'm not shocked by much, but when I popped the link open, I was like, holy cow, that'll get your attention.
Well, and we posted it, and I think the line was simply, hunters can use emotion to message as well. We don't have to divorce ourselves from an emotional argument, and I think we have to. At this point, we absolutely have to.
Yeah. So let's switch gears just a little bit here. We're in an election year. This is solely my personal opinion. I'm not going to pose it on you or Ramon, but parties aside, the previous administration before this one right now really had a focus on the outdoors. It doesn't matter if you hike, bike, hunt, fish, swim, whatever, and enjoy the outdoors. There seemed to be a renewed focus on the outdoors through the Department of the Interior and through the previous administration. I feel like this administration has largely ignored the outdoor enthusiasts. That's just my opinion. Several government agencies and departments. I work, as you probably know, on the steering committee with American Wildlife Conservation Partnerships. It's a consortium of a lot of different organizations, all the major organizations out there, over 30 of them. And we come up with a document every 4 years called Wildlife in the 21st Century. And that is basically a portfolio of recommendations for the incoming administrations. They're handed to both candidates' campaigns, with recommendations for the next 4 years. What do you think, living in this world, what do you think are our probably top priorities for the outdoors for the next 4 years, regardless of who comes into office?
Yeah, well, I just identified what I think is one of the top priorities, which of course is telling the story of hunting and its role in conservation. Look, sitting on the CSF board for the last, 5 or 6 years now, it's a bipartisan caucus, right? It's the largest bipartisan caucus in the Congress. And I think the one thing you can see in the Congress to a significant degree that you don't really see in any other issue is the notion that hunting and fishing transcends party. And so they do cross the aisle to do good work very often in the outdoors and conservation. So hopefully that continues. Hopefully we need a decent farm bill, and let's get that done. And let's look at some other funding mechanisms to really celebrate hunting, not once a year on hunting day, but year round. So we actually have it going forward. So I think those are key priorities. Obviously, we need to have the NRA come back and be active on the Second Amendment in a way that's meaningful, and hopefully that ship gets righted sooner than later.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what is your take on state fish and game agencies being populated, ironically, by people who do not hunt or fish?
Yeah, look, I was an intern back at the Wisconsin DNR, 30 years ago. And I think it was Tony Earl was the director of the agency at the time. And I remember this affirmative action coming in, and I just kept thinking, as a 20-year-old, it's like, I thought you would want to hire the people that actually knew something about this. Wouldn't it make sense to have a meritocracy and actually hire the most qualified people for the job, no matter what the job is, but especially in wildlife? So I think this push to, DEI push across the board has been basically a disaster, in my opinion, almost everywhere, especially the military. So as you look at that now, you just kind of go, we're seeing the fruits of some of that now. And you got a lot of people in state agencies that don't have any grounding whatsoever in hunting and fishing. And I'll give you another story. We had some folks up at the North American last year, the big wildlife conference where all the state agencies come together. A lot of the NGOs, the Camo Coalition organizations especially show up there. And several of the state directors said, look, we think the R3 program will slow the eventual demise of hunting, but it's just going to slow it so that we can find another funding mechanism for our agency. It isn't going to be sportsmen. It isn't going to be hunters that are going to fund this going forward, which I don't know how you guys react to that, but I was appalled. I mean, I was absolutely taken aback that this was actually thought of, much less said. And so I look at it and I go, all right, where the hell is all this Pittman Robertson money going? It's going to the states, right? And that's why I asked about this. Why don't we have, at this juncture, a modernization act of Pittman Robertson? When Pittman Robertson was passed, we barely had a Ducks Unlimited. We had none of the other NGOs with any delivery mechanisms, any ability to do anything. Well, now we do. So isn't it time that the private sector, the people that actually do support hunters, that are funded by hunters, that are members, whose members are hunters, actually get some of those funds, since it's a self-imposed tax? It's our money, right? We said, go ahead and tax this so we don't have another Dust Bowl. That's how far back this goes, right? So, the reality now is, I don't believe the state agencies are the solution to the loss of hunters. I don't think they've ever been the solution to that. They're not built for it. And that's really not a criticism of state agencies. There's a lot of great state agencies, a lot of great people in those agencies, but they've never been built to grow the ranks of hunters. That's not their mission. So we keep throwing all this money at them. And the R3 program, we go, why are we losing hunters? Why are we losing participants in this category? There's no qualification essentially to get that money in terms of performance. Yeah, there's qualification in terms of matching funds and all that, but what did you really do with that money that we just sent you? All those billions of dollars we've been pumping into the states. So coupled with your question of, we got state agencies now that have a lot of people that don't know anything about hunting, and even worse, don't like hunting, right? They don't even like hunting. So same with our Fish and Wildlife Service. So these agencies have been infiltrated by people that are not of the culture, don't like the culture, would love to see the culture go away. So yeah, it's cause for concern, you might say.
Yeah, I think I learned a lesson several years ago. I had a friend who was head of, and I'll not name this person or the agency, but was head of a fish and game agency, a state fish and game agency. And it was kind of an aha moment for me. Was this person, when the legislature was in session in that state, it was basically sitting at their desk going, okay, well, when is the governor's office going to call, or when am I going to have to run across to the Capitol? How do you do a job and manage thousands of people and millions of acres when you're basically sitting here waiting to go talk to the governor or go talk to somebody at the legislature all the time? I mean, that's sure. You nailed that point.
Well, in Colorado, we've got the governor appointing commissioners that are anti-hunting. Right, the wildlife commissioners are anti-hunting, so it's because his partner is a huge animal rights activist. So that's his agenda. He wants to end the stock show in Denver. He's against ranching. He wants to get some new. We just found out through some secret memos that were released. He wants to get some legislation passed before the governor leaves to bolster the wolf effort in Colorado. So, I mean, it's all agenda driven. These guys are, they're all out of the same ilk as far as I'm concerned. They're, follow the money in most cases.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I'm exhausted talking about it. The political years just wear me out. Because I guess, if I didn't care, I wouldn't be so exhausted from it. Yeah, but I'm glad we've got you on the show to talk about these things, because they're vitally important to the future of our country.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we're on the clock. The reality is we're on the clock. I think the good news is the industry gets it. We had we had about 5 billionaires represented in a room on the mountain lion issue. Either they were in the room or their surrogates were in the room saying, we've had enough. What do we got to do? Let's win this one. And that's the first time in my 25 years in Colorado anything like that's happened.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that's encouraging.
That is very encouraging, very encouraging. So let's talk about your world a little bit outside of the politics and things. So you've literally gone all over the world. You've seen a lot of stuff you can't probably talk about on this show and things like that. But kind of give us an example. What is one of the most surprising thing that you've encountered, or a culture or a tradition, or just one of these things where like, I never expected that. I'm going to go hunt this here. I know you've seen a lot and experienced a lot. So is there something top of mind that kind of jumps out to it that was just a big surprise moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, some of the landscapes have surprised me. I guess my impression, for instance, of Ethiopia was everybody was starving and there was nothing there. And you're going to go to this really, this country where pity is the leading export. And I got there and suddenly, it's a beautiful country. It's a gorgeous country. The wheat fields were full and the people were happy. And I just thought, wow, this is a little different than the Feed the Children campaigns I've seen out of Ethiopia, et cetera. Not to say that there aren't, kids in Ethiopia having problems.
Yeah, sure.
But that was a big surprise for me. And so a lot of it's just the landscape. I mean, you go into the cloud forest in Ethiopia, it's almost 10,000 feet. You're basically right on the equator and you're freezing your ass off because you're at 10,000 feet. It's like, wait a minute. I thought the equator was right here, but it's, stuff like that where you just kind of go, maybe I should have read a little bit more about what I was doing before I took off. One more layer would have been good,
Yeah, I don't think I've packed adequately.
Yeah, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? Can we buy it over here? No.
Yeah. Exactly. That's interesting that the landscape was the one that kind of went, yep.
Yeah, it was just shockingly different than I anticipated, and in a positive way. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. The cloud forest is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's a stunning environment, giant trees and colobus monkeys. And of course, that's the lair of the mountain Inyala, which is a spectacular antelope and everything else, giant forest hogs and hobbits, as far as I know.
So speaking of not reading and not preparing for those conditions, what is your preparation routine typically when you're doing, a big trip, both physically and packing?
Yeah, I mean, I live at about 7,000 feet, so it's nice that when I work out at 7,000 feet, it does translate, a little bit. And I mean, I did an elk hunt a couple of years ago here in Colorado that was almost 11,000 feet, which is higher than any of the sheep I've ever hunted. And I mean, I was sucking wind and I live at 7,000 feet. So I look at people, guests that come up from sea level and get to 7 or 8 or 9,000 feet. And I've been there. Once upon a time, I was a flatlander and getting into the mountains. So, just trying to stay in some semblance of shape is always important, just so you can enjoy it, if nothing else. But, I always marvel when teams come into Denver and play any sport, basketball, football, whatever. How do the Carolina Panthers at sea level come into Denver and function at a high level in a professional sport? I don't get it. I have no idea how they're able to do it. But it's impressive to watch. It's,
And why isn't Denver more dominant?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, well.
Hey, listen,
They're 2-2.
I'm a Saints fan. You guys have our old coach, so I was just I tell you what, he's got a tough road there. But
well, the Saints had a hot start. They looked awfully good for a couple of weeks.
Well, yeah, it's the Saints. We'll see what happens in the next 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So you guys have you and your team over the years have produced over over 100, 120 shows, 20 different networks. What's the next big thing that you can share with us that you guys are working on from a media standpoint? Something new and exciting?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of these IMAX films now. We've created a kind of a separate company to focus on just producing natural history IMAX films. We just did one on Great Salt Lake, which is a tremendous environmental story. It's a kind of a catastrophic story. But it's a story of hope as well, that they can save Great Salt Lake. And if they don't save Great Salt Lake, you can kiss Salt Lake City goodbye. That's the kind of impact it'll have. But we just did a film on that with Mike Rowe, just narrated that for us. We've got one coming on the Gulf Coast, and one called Living Forests, which is all about a celebration of North American forests. So it's really taken the IMAX format, which is this 80 by 60 foot screen, and you take something that's ordinary, and through the IMAX process, you make it extraordinary. And that's been a lot of fun. It's a whole different genre. We've been doing this now for almost 4 years, and it's been really fun to immerse in that whole business of the IMAX, the power of that, taking that content into streaming around the world, multiple languages, into the educational systems. We're in 10,000 schools with short form content from those IMAX films. So that's been a really fun process. And we've got one coming on the wild salmon of the Pacific Rim, which is basically using wild salmon as a thread to tell the story of the entire ecosystem of the Pacific Rim, from orcas to brown bears to spirit bears to sea wolves and eagles and all that. And it's a stunning landscape, as you might imagine. I mean,
Sure.
the Pacific Rim is absolutely gorgeous, and the footage that's coming back is out of this world. It's going to be a spectacular film. So that's been occupying a fair amount of my time when I'm not fighting the mountain lion ballot measure.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. What's your next big outdoor adventure? You're obviously in Colorado. The elk season's coming. Do you got something else planned beyond that?
I'm leaving in a few days to go up to Saskatchewan. We've got a lodge up there. It's a private lodge with a couple of member friends of mine, and taking a bunch of guys up there to hunt ducks and geese. And, I've always loved the prairies, and I spent a decade of my life working for Ducks Unlimited. So I had the benefit of crisscrossing the prairies a lot. So I got to identify really great zones for the hunting. And it's a spectacular area, and it's always fun. I just love the prairies. I love that wide open expanse. I love the migratory birds and great upland hunting up there as well. So that's like a week of my life every year in September, October is on the prairies. So that's fun.
I've had 3 different people I've talked to in the past week and a half that have never been up there I just got back from Canada. We did duck and geese, and 2 guys going next week or this week, whatever. Yeah. I think it's, and I got another buddy every year. He goes, duck, geese, and sandhill crane. And I think it's, I know people in Texas are sick and tired of all the waterfowl having left the state, since we're not planting rice in the Houston area anymore. Yeah, and I grew up in Louisiana hunting waterfowl. That was how I got into hunting. But it seems to be becoming more and more popular to go north of the border.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a little bit tricky because some of the provinces up there, like Manitoba, are trying to restrict some of the Americans coming up. So it's a bit of a dance that's happening right now. But it's, the hunting is so good, and the prairies are such a magical place. And again, our very first IMAX film was Wings Over Water. Michael Keaton, Birdman, narrated for us. And that's a celebration of that ecosystem, which, unless you're a duck hunter, you don't know anything about it, right? You've never heard of the prairie potholes or the prairie wetlands, unless you're really a duck hunter. But 70% of the water birds in North America depend on that ecosystem, 275,000 square mile ecosystem. That's essentially a gift of the glaciers, scraped out these potholes and created the ultimate soup kitchen for ducks. And that was a fun project just because it meant a lot to me. I spent so much time in the prairies, and then to celebrate that ecosystem. And the mission behind these films is simply to showcase to the mainstream, these are habitats that are magical. They're worth saving. Even if you're not a duck hunter, just they're an amazing piece of the planet. So we want to inspire audiences to do something, not just enjoy it, but to then do something. And that's a big part of the mission of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Chris, what would you say is the largest animal you could take down with your bare hands?
Gee, I hadn't thought of that one. Let's see.
Because, we're all tough in things with guns and arrows, but when it comes down to it, I had
a pheasant one time come to life in my game bag, and it was all I could do to subdue that pheasant. It spurred the hell out of me, and I mean, honest to God, it came up and just came right at my face like a fighting cock, and I've never seen a pheasant with vengeance before. That might be about as big as I'm going to go with my hands.
It's kind of hard to get. It's kind of an unfair fight when they're on your back.
I'm just, thank God there was no video. That was the good news. Yeah.
All you could do is really, I'm thinking I'd have to throw myself on the ground and try to suffocate it.
Drop and roll.
Fall backwards. Yeah. What's as we kind of wrap up here, I want to be respectful of your time. What's something that people would be surprised to know about you that most people don't know?
Mm. It's funny. I live in two different worlds. I live in the mainstream media world, and they're always shocked when I tell them I'm a hunter, and I'm not bashful about it. And so, the mainstream people look at me like, what is he? And other people look at me like, is he a TV guy? Is he a writer? Is he a magazine guy? What is he? And so I don't know. I mean, I've just always done my thing, and if I have fun doing it, I generally just keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I can respect that. I can respect that immensely. Yeah. You're not, there's not a bucket that people can put you in, because the first time I found out you were involved with a show like Cabin Masters or these other shows and Home Improvement, which heaven forbid I've watched enough of them.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that. I mean, as we remodel our house. Yeah, it's pretty cool that you're so diverse and your interest in things, that sort of thing. So that's kind of cool. I think that's to your advantage that people can't pigeonhole you.
It's always fun. You always think about the shows that got away that should have been great shows. And of course, my development team just had a ball when I came up with the idea of these. I said, let's do Maine Cabin Masters in Wisconsin, and we're going to call it Cottage Cheese Heads. Well, sadly, it never made it on air.
Were you able to keep a straight face?
I still think it's a great idea.
I like it. I like it.
Just takes the right cast. It's always about the right cast.
Sure. Yeah, the personalities is what drives the show. Absolutely. I think Ramon and I could probably do one.
I would do it.
I think you look the part. I'm telling you, you'll look the part.
We can discuss it when we're up there with you in Canada next week.
Yeah, come on up.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got room.
Just text me the address. We'll be there.
All right.
What would, in retrospect, you've obviously have done a lot over your life and have a lot still to do. What would the 15-year-old version of you say if it was looking, forward to you now, say to you?
That's a great question. Yeah. No, I mean, and I asked that question to a lot of people on camera that are in Africa, and people that started with nothing, built great businesses, and now can essentially do whatever they want to do. And a lot of times you get tears. I mean, they just can't believe that they're doing something that they never would have dreamt of. And I mean, look, I used to watch Kurt Gowdy and the American Sportsman. Maybe you did as well. And and the idea of walking in his footsteps around the planet, doing some of these things was forget it. I mean, that's not for you, right? I mean, that's all you would take away is, thank God I get to watch this show and see that piece of the planet. But then when you're able to do it, and Kurt wrote a foreword for one of my books shortly before he passed away. And so we had a great conversation about, his career and his love of conservation in his storytelling as well. And he said, just remember, they didn't save the buffalo for us.
Right.
So it was, anyway, that's all. I don't know. I mean, I never would have thought I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think you just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep going forward. And like I tell my kids, it's like, I'm not going to show you what to do. You're going to figure that out. But I hope you have some motivation and skill sets, and they do. And they're smart kids, and they're active hunters, and they are articulate defenders of hunting. And so that's a source of pride for me. I mean, the hunting I do now, the most valuable hunting I do now, is the time I get with them. So I really, really cherish that. I mean, that's a big deal to me.
Right. Well, Ramon, we've had a great time with our guest, Chris Dorsey.
I'm fascinated with Chris's
guys.
life.
They're always a hoot.
Yeah. We're that and more, but
we're gonna save the planet one of these days.
One of these days.
We're gonna do it.
In parting, for those listening and watching at home, we've got an election year coming up. It's going to be a pivotal year for us. And like you said, we're under the gun, pardon the pun, for the future of hunting, the future of conservation. So if there was one piece of advice that you could leave our audience as we close today, what would that be? Those people who love to hunt and fish in the outdoors. Yeah,
just get active and get out and vote, and make sure you take people with you to vote. Make sure a focus group of one is fine. Tell them what you think, and don't underestimate your ability to influence people through one conversation, one letter to the editor, one comment to a teacher, one chance to speak in front of your church. Take advantage of those things. If you care about it, share it.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. Chris Dorsey, folks, check out the website, sportingclassicstv.com. There's and all the social media as well. Some fantastic media out there. Chris, have a great elk season. And once again, we truly appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, guys. Great to be with you as always. Cheers.
Hunting Matters is a Houston Safari Club Foundation production, hosted by HSCF Executive Director Joe Betar and Ramon Robles. Produced by Ramon Robles. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For questions or more information, email us at info@wehuntwegive.org.